For sale by owners or expired listings, which is the better lead source to call? That is the question that I'm going to be answering in this video. I'm not surprised, but I get asked this question very often. Like, where should I start? Should I start with for sale by owners or expired listings? I hear of agents having success with both. The truth is, both can be a great source for getting listings. It really depends on your personality. When I got started, I had a lot of success with expired listings, but I also had a lot of success with for sale by owners, so I called both. But I was probably more 80% on the expired listing side and more 20% on the for sale by owner side. For me, that worked great. That was what I liked best. However, in your market, it could really depend, and based on the type of scripting you like to do, the type of conversations you want to be having with the prospect, what feels maybe more natural or comfortable for you, it might vary. But let's actually start with the pros of calling expired listings. First and foremost, when calling expired listings, you got to think they raised their hand and said, we want to sell, we tried to sell, and we're already willing to work with an agent. So you see that this seller already has this perception that I need an agent. There's value in hiring an agent. So that's a big pro when it comes to expired listings. You don't have to overcome why they need an agent, how you can provide value. You might have to overcome like their bad experience with their past agent and why you're different from that agent, but they don't want to sell it themselves. They want to find a strong agent, someone who can get the job done. So that's a big pro when it comes to expireds. Now, what are the cons with expired listings? The first one going to be actually trying to get the right phone number for the seller, right? Trying to contact them. So you can use a service like RedX, Vulcan 7, Mojo. You can maybe even use your MLS and do it manually, but finding the right number, one that's in service, one that's not maybe, like the mother or, the brother, or even the previous owner can be a challenge, and that can be frustrating. So I want to set proper expectations going into it. When you start prospecting expireds, you have to know you're going to have a lot of wrong numbers that you're going to have to sort through. And that's why I always recommend using a power dialer. Think of this like really mining for gold, right? You can imagine the miners back in the 1800s. Once they get through all that dirt and those rocks, they're finally left with some gold in the bottom of that pan, right? Well, that's what you're doing with this data. You need to call like the miner is sifting with the gold pan, and then you finally get to the good numbers and you make the contacts. And what's cool is once you go through the list, let's just say it's last month's expired listings. Once you go through that list a few times with the dialer and you're marking the bad numbers, the do not call type numbers and things like that, you're left with all the good ones. And now it's a really high value prospect list that has great data. Once you get through all the bad numbers and you're actually talking to the prospect, you got to get through what their objections might be when it comes to relisting their home or relisting their home with an agent. Sometimes, even though they weren't for sale by owner, they might want to go for sale by owner based on their previous experience with the last agent. So it's really your job to make sure they understand why it's important to still work with a great agent like you. The number one thing though, typically why a home expires is the price. You got to get them to understand the price was off. And you can't come across and just say that on the phone, because oftentimes the seller thinks that their price is right or they want more than what it's worth. That's really a conversation at the listing table, but you got to make them understand that you're an agent that can get the job done by using scripts, and I have a link in the description to a seller prospecting course that I did. You can download free scripts there, but you got to get them to understand that, hey, I'm different than the last agent. Let me come out and let's talk about it. And then you set the listing appointment. And then at the appointment, you go through pricing. And when you can get that client to price their home right, let them self-discover the correct price, you'll get a great listing at a great price that will cause it to sell. Now let's talk about the for sale by owners. A big pro here is you can actually get a hold of them, right? They're trying to sell the house on their own, so their phone number is readily available, unlike the expired listings. So when you have a list of for sale by owners, it's pretty easy to get in contact with them. Most of the time when working with for sale by owners, they eventually come to the conclusion that they're having a hard time or they can't sell it on their own. So they're open to listen to the advice of an agent when they prove to themselves that they can't sell it. So that's great when it comes to actually having that initial conversation with the for sale by owner. However, what I found is that initial call, especially if they just listed it within the last month or two for sale by owner, they're still thinking they can get the home sold. So it's more of a long-term follow-up process to get the appointment, whereas expireds, you might get the appointment on that first call. Now, what are the cons? Well, they've decided not to hire an agent, so they're trying to avoid agents at all costs. So they're going to have a lot of objections naturally, right? So it's your job to overcome those objections, find out why they didn't want to list with an agent, and see if you can maybe help them see it from a different perspective. At the end of the day, more likely than not, it's about the cost. They don't see the value in hiring an agent. They think that it's easier than they expect, or that maybe agents are just overpaid. So they're like, you know what, I'm going to save the X amount of commission and do it on my own. So you really need to be able to portray what the value is when working with you. One of the scripts that I loved when working with for sale by owners on that initial call was, you know what, Mr. Seller, it was really great talking to you, but I got to hop on my next call. But before I let you go, and I know you want to keep trying to sell on your own, and I get it, no problem there. But let me just ask, if I could actually net, like in your pocket, more money with me selling it than you could on your own, wouldn't it make sense to at least sit down and chat about it for a minute? Something like that, like net, more money in your pocket, wouldn't it make more sense to at least meet with me? Because when you ask that, well, of course, if you as the agent can net them more in their pocket than they could selling it on their own, of course, that would make sense for them to meet with you. They're going to be thinking, well, how can you do that if I have to pay you a commission? Well, that's your job to show your value at the listing table. And you can actually get these stats from NAR that when someone lists with an agent, they do tend to get more money and net more money for their client. And another thing that I noticed is that for sale by owners tend to be a little more popular to prospect than expired listings. So you might face a little more competition. So you actually might want to start calling some older for sale by owners. Maybe you do a mailing campaign. Maybe you do a social media messaging campaign through LinkedIn or Facebook, get a hold of them that way. Just kind of drip on them, send a friend request. That way they can see you're a real person. You got a family, you live in the neighborhood or the area. And things like that can help and go a long way if you feel like the competition is really steep when it comes to for sale by owners or even new expireds in your market. By watching this video, you're asking the right question. It's not if I should prospect, it's who should I prospect? And the reality is it's going to take hard work whether you call for sale by owners or expired listings. I recommend you call both. It's really great to shake it up. If you have a 3-hour time block at the beginning of the day where you're going to prospect, well, if you're calling all for sale by owners, you're probably going to run out. Or if you're calling all expired listings and old expireds, it's just going to get a little stale. And to have a little more variety in the type of people that you're calling is going to keep you a little more energized and just a little more engaged versus being so bored. I found, and I learned this early on in my career, that success is largely due to mastering repetitious boredom. And it's not even so much the rejection that you get while prospecting that most people end up quitting. It's because it's just really boring. That's the reality. But my friends, is your freedom worth it? I started back in 2013. By my second year, I was selling 36 homes as an individual agent. And just a few years after that, I created financial freedom as a real estate agent. So what this business can bring you as a realtor is amazing. You can live an amazing life for you and your family. So is it worth it being kind of bored for a few hours a day, facing a little bit of rejection? Well, yeah, to me it is. You got to answer that question to yourself.